PhD, a CPA, a professor at the University of Tulsa. He's also the founder of Joplin Consulting Group, with 30-plus years of helping organizations explore opportunities and achieve results. He has spoken alongside some of the biggest names in business. To his students, they call him the most valuable professor. Everyone else just calls him Dr. J. Please give us a warm welcome to Dr.
Thanks for that kind introduction. You read that just the way I wrote it. I appreciate that. All right. So for the next hour or so, I'm going to talk to you about how you can create such a unique experience for your customers that they would not consider doing business anywhere else. Now, I know many of you are sitting there thinking, well, wait a second, my job doesn't involve dealing directly with customers, so I'm just going to sit here and answer emails for the next hour. Not so fast. We all have customers, right? You may serve internal stakeholders, or you may serve external customers, but we all serve customers of one kind or another. And one thing I've noticed from dealing with companies around the country is it's getting more and more difficult to differentiate our products. You may have a conversation or a call or a meeting with a customer, and you'll talk about the great features of your products and all the benefits they should expect. But if we were to go back and talk to those customers in a couple of weeks, many times they have trouble recalling the specific features and benefits that you talked about. But here's something I know. Customers never forget how you made them feel. They never forget how you made them feel. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Now, anytime I speak to a group, I like to set expectations before I start. And to be honest, I like to set modest expectations so that when you leave, you'll say, you know what, that Dr. J guy wasn't so bad. He was actually okay, right? And so I'll give you a story about what led me to creating modest expectations. Several years ago, I travel around the country and speak and go out of town about once a month. And several years ago, I started to practice, and anytime I go out of town, I buy my wife a little box of really great chocolates, right? This little chocolate store close to where we live. And so I'll leave them somewhere around the house for her, so when I'm gone, she'll know that I'm thinking of her. Maybe one trip I'll leave the chocolates on her chair in the living room. Next trip I may leave them on her pillow in the bedroom. Maybe the next trip I'll leave them on her vanity in the bathroom. I don't hide the chocolates, I just leave them someplace else each time. Now let me ask you a question. This is the audience participation part. Do you think after doing this for several years that I've created a certain expectation with my wife?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Well, a while back I got to my destination and I realized, oh no, oh boy, I forgot to get the chocolates. Now, do you think that was a potential problem?
Yes.
Right, so, I started this practice to do something nice for my wife so she would know I was thinking about her, and in this instance, it actually made it negative. She comes home from work and she goes in looking on her chair, no chocolate. Then she goes into the bedroom, looks on her pillow, no chocolates. He must have gotten creative and left them someplace entirely new. No, there's no chocolates. And so she goes on a 30-minute scavenger hunt trying to find chocolates that don't exist. And so that's why I've learned to try to set modest expectations. Oh, by the way, my videographer today is my wife, so here's your chocolates.
Thank you.
Now, who in here can tell me who this guy is up here? Does anybody know? Speak. John Calipari, the Razorbacks basketball coach. Had a pretty good year. Razorbacks had a pretty good year, right? They won the SEC tournament, made it to the Sweet 16. And so I've got a couple questions for you. You don't have to be a basketball fan. You don't have to be a Razorbacks fan to answer this. I think you can probably guess. I went back and checked the statistics this year. How many points do you think Coach Calipari personally scored? 0. How many rebounds did Coach Calipari personally pull down? 0, right? Coach Calipari created a plan and his players executed that plan. And so our roles today are similar to Coach Calipari's. I'm going to give you a plan, some things you can go out and execute on, but you have to actually do the work. Now, I'm going to tell you just a little bit more about myself because I believe context is important. Now, I know you don't really care what I've done in the past. You just hope I don't suck for the next 60 minutes, right? Right? But context is important. Let me explain why context is important. I mentioned that I travel around the country, speaking to groups, go to different parts of the country and speak at different venues. Recently, I got to my destination and I saw one of these advertisements on the wall of the venue. You've seen them, right? In hotels or airports or this type of thing, they have the advertisements on the wall. And I looked at this advertisement and I thought, oh my gosh, I know that lady. That's Alicia. I know her. And so I thought, I'm going to take my camera and I'm going to take a picture of this advertisement with Alicia, and I'm going to text it to her so she'll know that I saw her advertisement. Now, does that seem like a reasonable thing to do? Yes. I thought so, but the guys standing at the urinals next to me were a little put off by that. It was a little awkward, right? They finished their business and got on their way. So I would say the context is important, so I am going to tell you a little bit more about myself. I have been helping companies for 30 years create, improve, and execute their business strategies. I teach the Capstone Business Strategy at the University of Tulsa, and I see everything in the world pretty much through the lens of strategy. Everything's a strategy issue for me. The other thing, as Zane pointed out, my students refer to me as Dr. J because I love basketball. Some of you old-timers may remember Julius Erving, the original Dr. J, so it's kind of a figurative tip of the hat to the original Dr. J. So I see everything as a strategy issue or a basketball issue, and sometimes as a basketball strategy issue. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about how you can create this unique customer experience through the lens of strategy. Anybody know who this is?
Yes.
Who is it?
Scott Covert.
Scott Covert. What does Scott Covert do? He's a meteorologist, right? Have you ever noticed that meteorologists are always talking about the weather, but they never do anything about it? My challenge to you today is when you leave here, just don't talk about the things we discussed for the next 45 minutes or so. Go out and try to apply the things that you're going to learn. Now, some of you are sitting there thinking, you know what, Dr. J, we've been doing this a while. This isn't our first rodeo. We've been doing this since the 1950s. We're just fine. Well, you know, when I was growing up, my family bought everything at Sears. Bought my school clothes, bought our Christmas toys. My dad bought his tools there. Last time I checked, there were 5 Sears stores left. 5. At one time, Howard Johnson's was the largest restaurant chain in the United States. There are none of those left. Some of us are old enough to remember that when we would rent a movie, we would have to get in the car and drive to the video store, to a video store like Blockbuster, and rent a video, to rent a movie. There were over 9,000 Blockbuster videos, now there's one. I tell you this because the things that made us successful in the past will not necessarily make us successful in the future. We have to continually get better, not just continually get better, but get better faster than our competitors are getting better. And I'm going to give you some hints on how to do that today. I like this quote by Peter Drucker. You may know he's a management guru. He said the best way to predict the future is to create it. That sounds a little presumptuous, right? I mean, there's a lot of things we don't control. We don't control the economy. We don't control interest rates, unemployment rates, that type of thing. We don't control tariffs and some of the decisions they're making in Washington. But we have a lot more agency, a lot more influence over the things that are going on around us than we realize. And we have 100% of the ability to respond to the things that are going on around us. So I'm going to challenge you today to think about how you can create the future that you want for yourself and this company and your customers. Gail Matthews is a researcher in California, and she worked on a research project a few years ago on goal setting. And so in her research, she found that 83% of all people have no goals at all. They're just wandering through life like Gomer Pyle on Valium. 14% of people have goals in their head, but they haven't written them down. And those people are 10 times more successful than the people with no goals. But the people who write down their goals are 30 times more successful than the people with no goals. I don't know how anyone would not have written goals knowing that. Now, this research was done at the individual level. I'm more concerned about the organizational level, although this is important and useful. The research says that only 50% of companies, only 50% of organizations have a formal written strategy. Only half of all companies have a formal written strategy. Now, as someone who helps companies create, improve, and execute their business strategies, how do you think that makes me feel that half of all companies don't have a plan? I feel a little bit like the shoe salesman that his company sent him to a third world country. His predecessor came back and said, nobody in that country wears shoes, there's no opportunity. The second salesperson gets there, sent back the same information, says, nobody in this country wears shoes, unlimited opportunity, send me all the shoes you have. And so I actually get pretty fired up because half all the companies out there are potential clients for me. Now, if you've been involved in strategy here at either ABB or another organization you worked at, you probably know there's a number of different systems or programs you can use to create strategy. There's over 11,000 books with the word strategic planning in the title. There are over 50,000 books about strategy. And so there's plenty of books out there. And they all discuss these supposedly different systems and programs and plans, but they all follow the same basic steps. You start with broad, timeless principles like your core values, your vision, your purpose. Then you do some type of analysis about what are the strengths of your organization, what are the opportunities in your marketplace. And you're not finished until you have created specific measurable goals assigned to a specific person and due by a specific date. Pretty much the plan. This is the steps I use with my clients. I've been using them for 30 years, companies all across the country. We start out by documenting their vision. Company vision is comprised of the core values, purpose, and the mission. Once the company understands their vision, we can conduct a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Then based on our strengths and the opportunities in front of us, we can create a specific strategy that moves us closer to fulfilling our mission. Then we create objectives, certain goals that we want to accomplish, right? And then action plans that will accomplish those objectives. And then we create some type of system for measuring our progress and how are we going to communicate that to our stakeholders. So that's the steps I've been using for 30 years, and I can tell you, it just works. It works. I've been doing this a long time with companies in all different industries, and it's almost, if I were to turn loose of this clicker, it would fall because of the law of gravity. These steps work. No, we never hit 100% of our goals, but if we follow these steps, we'll be more successful. Now, there have been some other authors come out more recently, and they say, well, I've got a whole new system. And they come up with some cool new words. Gino Wickman came out with a program. He calls it the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and he wrote a book called Traction to go talk you through that. But here's what I found after reading Traction, is that it's the same steps with new names. Gino doesn't have objectives, he has rocks. He doesn't have a measurement system and a communication plan. He has a level 10 meeting, but it's the same steps. It's old wine in new wineskins. One of the companies I work with is Quick Trip Corporation. You've probably heard of Quick Trip Corporation, or you've seen them if you travel around the convenience store chain. They like this program called Playing to Win by Lafley and Martin. They, again, you follow the same steps, but they say, instead of talking about their vision, they say, what's our winning aspiration, right? Our winning aspiration. They don't talk about a SWOT analysis, they talk about where will we play and how will we win. But it's the same steps. Now, I want to drill down just for a minute on vision. Remember, the vision of an organization is comprised of three parts. The first are the values. Core values are 3 to 6 principles that before you would consciously violate one of those principles, you would walk away from a great business opportunity. They're almost sacred, right? We don't so much decide on our core values as we discover them. It's like they're written on our DNA. It's part of who we are. A level up from that is our purpose. Our purpose is like our compass or our North Star. We're always pursuing it, but the organization never completely fulfills its purpose as long as it's in business. And then the last component of our vision is the mission. A mission is like a big, hairy, audacious goal, a BHAG. It has a clear finish line. You should be able to accomplish it in 5 to 10 years, and you absolutely know when it's done. Now, my understanding from looking at your website is ABB's core values are courage, care, curiosity, and collaboration. Those are great core values. Hopefully this isn't news to you. You know what these are, and you do your best to live these values. No company's perfect, right? Because companies are comprised of people, and we're not perfect. But those are great values. Again, you remember our purpose is like our North Star, our compass. It's a level up from our core values, but it should be consistent with our core values. It's not 2 pages long. It should be a sentence or two. And it should guide the organization for 100 years. My understanding is ABB's purpose is to create value for all your stakeholders. through your leading technologies, and doing so, create a more prosperous and sustainable future. Great purpose. Now, do you think it's important to have a mission? I mean, maybe there's an argument that it's not that important. There's a couple of reasons that I think it really is important. First of all, there are times in your career, you all know this, where you have to put forth a tremendous amount of effort. That in the short term, it just doesn't make sense. Why am I working late tonight, or working so much overtime this week, or working the weekend? I've got all these pressing deadlines. But if you understand your why, you'll figure out the how. If your why is strong enough, you'll figure out the how. And so, understanding our organization's mission helps us get through those tough times when it requires extraordinary effort. The other reason a mission is important is we all have choices. Individually, we have limited time and resources, and organizationally, we have limited time and resources. We have to pick between A or B, right? Everything we say yes to means we say no to something else. Well, how do you know which project is best? Which new product is best? You can look at the different options and say, which one of these options will move us closer to fulfilling our mission? And so a mission statement, if for no other reason, is important for those two reasons. My understanding is your mission is to be the best as determined by your customers. The thing I love about that is you recognize that your customers decide if you're the best or not. Lots of companies aspire to be great. Many even aspire to be the best, but not as many recognize that they don't get to decide if they're the best or not. The customers will ultimately make that decision. Here's an example of why vision is so important. And even when I'm working with new companies, a lot of times they're like, hey, this vision stuff's great, but let's get down to making some decisions. I know you type A personalities. You're like, why are we spending all this time on this fluffy, soft stuff? Let's make some decisions. Vision is important. Here's an example of why. You may have heard this story. A guy's walking past this huge construction project. And he walks past this first construction worker and says, what are you doing here? And the worker says, I'm laying bricks. Right? So the guy walks a little further down the street, asks the second construction worker, says, what are you guys doing here? And the guy looks up and goes, I'm laying bricks. Pretty obvious, right? He finally gets down to the end of the block, asks the last construction worker there, says, what is it you're doing? And the third construction worker stands up, dusts himself off, looks up at the building and says, I'm building a cathedral. That's the difference between employees with vision and employees who lack vision. Employees without vision are just laying bricks, and employees with vision are building a cathedral. I hope this room is full of cathedral builders, that you realize you're doing something important that's making the world a better place, and you're a cathedral builder. Now, as I was thinking about what I wanted to share with you today, I was reminded of a book called Atlas Shrugged. Some of you may have read this book at one time, but in this book, the hero of the book is a guy named John Galt, and John Galt invents a very innovative experimental motor, and he's working on it. And at some point during the story, John Galt quits working on the motor and disappears. And in the book, John Galt's motor is a metaphor for the most innovative and productive people in the world. It asks the question, what would the world be like if the most innovative and productive people just withdrew and didn't offer their skills and abilities? And in the book, they refer to John Galt's motor and this idea of the innovative and productive people as the motor of the world, the motor that drives the world, the motor that runs the world. And I thought, how cool is it to be part of an organization that you literally build the motors that power the world? Now, I know you have other products other than motors, other very important products, but what a cool vision, what a cool visual that you know that you're making the motors that power the world. What would happen if all of a sudden the ABB motors and other products that you provide to your customers were not there? There would be a whole lot of things that quit working. So you guys should be very proud of what you do in the organization you're part of. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of organizations that I think their employees did not share the vision. A while back I went into the cleaners to pick up my dress shirts from the dry cleaners, and I was making conversation with the young lady at the counter. I said, hey, how's it going? She goes, oh, it's great. It's really slow. I said, what? She says, it's great, it's really slow. I thought to myself, I bet the owners don't think it's really great. Right? I suspect the owners, the leaders of that dry cleaners, did not think it was great that they were slow and that maybe she didn't share their vision. All true stories. It wasn't too long after that my wife and I decided we're going to drive to New Orleans for the Sugar Bowl for a football game. We decided to drive because I wanted to stop in Baton Rouge and see a friend of mine. I got this thermos at Bass Pro that will keep hot coffee hot for like 4 days. It's an amazing thermos. And so I think, I'm going to stop at this coffee place close to our house and get them to fill my thermos with coffee. We'll have hot coffee all the way to New Orleans. So I pulled up to the drive-up window and I said to the young man at the window, I said, what would you charge me for a thermos of coffee? And he said, oh, I'm sorry, I can't sell you a thermos of coffee. I said, well, you have coffee, I have a thermos, right? Now, what are some potential reasons this young man believed he could not sell me a thermos of coffee? What are some reasons you... Food safety, right? So maybe the health department doesn't allow them to fill outside containers. Can you think of a way he might have worked around that? And
yes.
what could he have done? You didn't have to think about that very long. What would you have done?
Sold you a bunch of cups.
He could have sold me 6 cups of coffee, right? I'd been happy to pour them in my thermos. Another reason might be, well, maybe he's got one of those fancy computerized cash registers. He's got, you know, tall, grande, venti, small, medium, and large. He doesn't have a button that says thermos, so he doesn't know how to ring it up. Again, just punch in 6 cups of coffee and sell it to me, right? I think if the owner had been working the window that day, he would have figured out a way to sell me a thermos of coffee, but he didn't. Here's an example of an organization that I love, that I believe their employees do get it. You may be familiar with House Smith Restaurants, you may not. They're based in Oklahoma. They've got about a dozen restaurant concepts, all different types, from breakfast restaurants, Mexican restaurants, high-end steakhouses, hamburger places. I think the closest House Smith restaurant to Fort Smith is probably a Smitty's Garage. But they have restaurants all over the Midwest, and they're one of my favorite examples of companies that really get this idea. So if you go into any House Smith restaurant anywhere, somewhere in their restaurant there's a plaque that says, our mission is to consistently exceed our guest expectations. And a while back I was looking online at their job postings. I noticed that every job posting, among their responsibilities that are listed for every job posting, one of the responsibilities is to consistently exceed their guest expectations. I know you can't read this, it's a little bit of an eye chart, but every single job posting, that's one of their job responsibilities. And you notice this job posting isn't for a manager or assistant manager or even a cook or a server. It's for someone to bus tables and fill water glasses, and yet part of their responsibility is to consistently exceed their guest expectations. And I was thinking about that, and whenever we go out to eat at a House Smith restaurant, I realize that they never ask us, will this table be okay? They always say something similar to, will this table be perfect? They never say, is your steak or is your meal okay? They say, is your steak excellent? Well, a while back, my wife and I were having some remodeling work done on our house, and the contractor calls up on Friday and says, hey, I've got some bad news. Some of the materials I need to finish your job today didn't come in. I'm not going to be able to finish the work. I said, that's a big problem, because I got 20 dinner guests coming over on Sunday night, and all of our furniture is stacked in the living room. How am I going to entertain these guests? He goes, I don't know what to tell you. The materials didn't come in. There's nothing I can do. But whenever my wife or I are having a really good day, we go to Charleston and celebrate. If we're having a really tough day, we go to Charleston to make ourselves feel better. So I said, Colleen, let's go to Charleston, right? And so we go to Charleston, we order the filet like we always do. We love their filet. And the server, like they always do, came out and said, would you mind cutting into your steak to make sure it's perfect? Now remember, my wife's had a little bit of a day, right? Right? And so she cuts into her steak and she says, it's fine, it's fine. And the server steps back and she says, I'm so sorry. Fine is not good enough at Charleston's. Would you like us to remake your meal? And as someone who studies management and customer service and the customer experience, I wanted to hug that server. Man, I was like clapping. I was like, oh my gosh. Because this employee understood that their mission is to consistently exceed their guest expectation. Fine is not good enough. All right, so once we establish an organization's vision, we'll do a SWOT analysis. Tell me what a SWOT analysis is. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, right? And I always like to challenge organizations to find objective data, not just their opinion, because do you know every company, every organization, every prospective client I meet with, when I ask them, I say, what are some of the strengths of your organization? Every company, everyone says, our employees are a strength. Okay, maybe. But did you know I hear that from every company I talk to, and it's statistically impossible for every company to have above average employees? Where are all the idiots working? Right? Now, maybe the companies that hire idiots don't do strategic planning, or they don't call me. But yeah, SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Who can tell me who this is? Shaquille O'Neal. What do you know about Shaquille O'Neal? Yeah, that's true. Yes, also true. He played in the NBA for 19 years, made the All-Star team 15 times, 4 NBA championships, multiple times he's an MVP of the league. Can we agree, he made millions of dollars over 20 years playing basketball. Can we agree that Shaquille O'Neal was a great athlete? Right? I think that's a fact. But I would argue he'd be a terrible jockey. Right? It doesn't matter how much he practices. It doesn't matter how much his mama says, Shaq, you keep riding those horses, you're gonna win the Kentucky Derby. No, he's not. Right? He's 7'1" and his playing weight was 324 pounds. He's never going to win the Kentucky Derby. Shaquille O'Neal understood his strengths, and he played to his strengths. As organizations, we have to do the same thing. We have to understand our strengths. Now, whenever I meet with a new client, and sometimes even my existing clients, I have to challenge them to think big, because we tend to often think too small. We've been so beaten down by life that we're just trying to get through the day or the week or the year or hit our quarterly target. So I like to remind people of some dreamers throughout history and some of the wet blankets that they encountered. So you may remember from school, Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. He took that to Western Union and pitched the idea of the telephone to Western Union, and Western Union said the telephone has too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication. The device is of no use to us. And I bet if we were to take a poll, every one of you right now have a phone in your pocket, and if you'd have come to work without it, you'd have turned around and went home, because you couldn't go 8 hours without your phone. But it was of no value to Western Union. Fred Smith, who was the founder of FedEx, when he was a student at Yale, wrote a paper for his idea about an overnight delivery service. And the professor gave him a C. He said, in order to earn better than a C, the idea must actually be feasible. That idea seemed to work out okay. FedEx seems to be doing all right, right? In the days of silent movies, some people pitched the idea of Warner Brothers of movies with sound. And Warner Brothers said, who the hell wants to hear actors talk? Me, I don't want to sit for 2 hours in the theater and watch mimes on the screen, right? You may know that Bill Bowerman was the co-founder of Nike with Phil Knight. And one of their first shoes was a running shoe with a waffle sole. They literally would mold the sole of the shoe on a waffle iron and cut it out for their prototypes. And so they took this running shoe to a shoe manufacturer, and the running shoe manufacturer said, we don't tell you how to coach, don't tell us how to make shoes. Man, do not let people rain on your parade. I like to think I'm a pretty open-minded guy, but I can tell you when I was growing up in the 70s in rural Oklahoma, if you'd have told me the largest retailer in the world would have been located in Bentonville, Arkansas, I'd have been, I don't think so, not in Bentonville, right? Don't think small. So here's a hypothetical question. Hopefully it's rhetorical and it's not that hard for you. Not that hard for you. All right, visual aid. All right, here. So if you've been tasked with coming up with a new multi-million-dollar idea, any idea, but it has to be a multi-million-dollar idea. And you can start with a head of lettuce, or you can start with all the talent in this room and all the resources that ABB has. Which do you think would be the best resource to start with?
The ABB.
Yeah, oh, thank you, thank you. And yet, let's look at what... Whoops, I may have clicked one too many. Look at this quote from Gary Hamel, Leading the Revolution. He said, you can't put a computer chip in lettuce. You can't send lettuce over the internet. The market for pre-washed, pre-cut, pre-packaged lettuce grew from nothing in the 1980s to 1.4 billion in the year 2000. Send an email to everybody on your team. If someone could create a $1.4 billion market with lettuce, what the hell is our excuse? We have no excuse, folks. Think big. Think outside the box. Now, I've been doing this for 30 years with companies all across the country. I have an earned PhD in management. I teach strategy. And here's what I know. To have a sustainable competitive advantage, you have to check 4 boxes on the products or services that you offer. They need to be valuable, right? People will pay you money for them. They need to be somewhat rare. Not many of your competitors should have access to that product or service or resources. They should be difficult to imitate and not easily substituted, right? If you don't check any of those boxes, you're at a disadvantage to your competitors. I know that is not the case with ABB. If you're selling something that's valuable but not rare, not difficult to imitate, not easily substituted, you're only on par. You're on par with your competitors, but you don't have any advantage. If you're selling a product or service that's valuable and rare, but it can be imitated or substituted, you only have a temporary competitive advantage, because your competitors are going to look at you and go, pretty good idea, and then they're going to backwards engineer it, and they're going to create a product or service that's just as good or maybe even a little better, because they're going to take what you did and one-up it if they can. We need to be able to check all four of these boxes: valuable, rare, difficult to imitate, not easily substituted. You guys got Chick-fil-A's out here? We got Chick-fil-A's in Tulsa too. This is an interesting phenomenon to me. There's one particular Chick-fil-A in Tulsa that when I go by, the cars are backed up at the drive-up window into the street. Right? People want Chick-fil-A. Directly across the street, there's a Wendy's. Did you know Wendy's has a pretty good chicken sandwich? And yet people will line up like this, sit there for 10 minutes to get a chicken sandwich, rather than go across the street to Wendy's. In an actual survey done of Chick-fil-A customers, where they asked Chick-fil-A customers, what is it that makes you like Chick-fil-A more than other fast food restaurants? Do you know what they said? It was not waffle fries, but it should have been. And it wasn't the chicken sandwich.
Customer service.
They said, the employees at Chick-fil-A say, please, and thank you, and my pleasure. You'd think that would be something that would be easily imitated, but most fast food places do not do that, or even something similar. I heard a story, it's not my story, but it's a true story, of a guy who was on his way to work. He decides he's going to stop at a convenience store and get a breakfast burrito and a cup of coffee on the way to work, right? And so he stops, gets his breakfast burrito, cup of coffee, sits on the counter, cashier rings him up. He slides a $20 bill across the counter. She hands him back his change. So he takes his breakfast burrito and he turns around and starts to leave. And he pauses and he looks at the cashier and he says, aren't you going to say thank you? And she said, it says it on the receipt. That's the kind of world we live in, right? Some of these things should be easily imitated, but they're not. So the challenge for you is, can you create a product or service that's valuable, rare, not easily imitated, and not easily substituted? All right, and look at the comments. The thing that customers consistently say is, oh my gosh, out by the pool, they have a red telephone. And when you pick up the red telephone, someone on the other end says, Popsicle Hotline, how may I help you? And you can say, I'd like a great popsicle, please. And somebody with a white glove and a silver tray will deliver you a great popsicle poolside. Now, that's not an expensive thing. That's not a difficult thing to do, but that's the thing that customers remember and remark about. Magic Castle Hotel have taken this idea of the popsicle hotline and made it memorable. They've magnified their guest stay and made it more memorable. Well, apparently the Four Seasons in Austin, Texas heard about this and decided to one-up it. Some of you may have been to Austin, maybe for a Razorback Longhorn game, maybe you stayed at the Four Seasons. If you did, you may have noticed in their guest rooms on the phone, they have a margarita hotline. You can press the margarita hotline button and they will bring a cart to your room and make a margarita for you right in your room. Different example, Houston, Texas. There are a couple of teachers sitting in a pub one afternoon watching the broadcast of National Signing Day. You know, the day where the high school players announce what university they're going to go play ball at or compete at. You know, the athlete will be sitting at a table with all the different hats or jerseys or something that say, next year I'm going to go to the University of Arkansas and play basketball, right? And these two teachers said, you know, that's pretty cool. But it's pretty sad because most of our students are going to be going to college next year and we don't celebrate them the same way. And they're going to be doing really important, amazing things in their lives and we just let that moment pass. And so they went back to their school, which is US Prep Academy, and they decided they're going to create a National Signing Day for all of their seniors. The first year they did it, they had their National Signing Day and they had every student come across the stage and with either their ball cap or their jersey or their t-shirt or their pin and say, next year I'm going to be studying engineering at Euler. or University of Arkansas, or wherever, right? It was so popular, they did such a great job of taking this event and magnifying it for their students and the friends and family of their students, that it grew from 450. The last year I have numbers on, they had to move the ceremony to the basketball arena at Rice University, and there were between 6,000 and 8,000 people there. Let's think about this. It's a high school graduation, right? It's an ending, in a way. It's an ending of their high school career. It's a beginning. They're announcing where they're going to go to college. And it's a peak, too. It's a pretty big deal when you graduate from high school or college or something. And these two educators, these two teachers realized that, and they made this event so special that these students have never forgotten it. And they live stream it. So if they have friends and family around the world that can't come, they can watch it on social media. They created a Purple Cow experience by leveraging the power of moments. More personal example, I have a personal friend who a couple years ago on Thanksgiving Day, he got up and they're making all their dishes for Thanksgiving lunch, right? And they have some particular dish they make for Thanksgiving that requires mozzarella cheese. I don't know what it is. We don't have to use mozzarella cheese for our Thanksgiving dinners, but they needed mozzarella cheese and he realized we're out. Well, that's a big problem on Thanksgiving morning because most grocery stores are closed on Thanksgiving morning. So he's driving around town trying to find some place that might have mozzarella cheese. And he finally, just out of desperation, stops at Quick Trip, the convenience store. And he says, "You don't by chance sell mozzarella cheese?" And the clerk said, "No, I'm sorry, we don't sell mozzarella cheese, but we make pizzas in the back here in the kitchen. I'll just give you a cup of mozzarella cheese." And so this clerk, because he just didn't stick to the script and go, no, we don't sell mozzarella cheese. Thanks, have a great day. He thought, how can I salvage this experience for this customer? He saved Thanksgiving because at my friend's house, Thanksgiving wasn't Thanksgiving with this particular without this dish with mozzarella cheese. They took this special event, this peak, Thanksgiving dinner, and elevated, magnified it. Have you heard the Savannah Bananas? Right? If you know the Savannah Bananas, you probably know them because of their on-field antics, right? Their show. But they do a lot of things behind the scenes to enhance the customer experience that have nothing to do with the show. Several years ago, they had a process where they would call every customer, every fan that bought tickets and say, "Hey, just noticed you have tickets for the game next week. Just wanted to thank you. Hope you have a great time at the game." And so they had an intern named Barry calling some of their fans. He called this one family up who had bought 9 tickets. And at the time, that was a big deal. Now, it's not unusual for them to sell a lot of tickets to a particular fan, but back then it was. He said, "Hey, I noticed you bought 9 tickets to the game next week. I just want to thank you for buying those tickets. Hope you have a great time." And the guy said, "Well, yeah, you're right. We bought 9 tickets. We have 7 kids." He goes, "But we're not going to be able to come. Tragically, my wife passed away last week, and we just, under the circumstances, we just can't come." Well, Barry could have, sheepishly said, "I'm so sorry," and hang up, right? "So sorry for your loss." But he said, he did say he's sorry. "Man, that's terrible. I can't imagine how difficult that is." He said, "Will you consider bringing your kids to the game and let us try to make this a truly special experience for them?" So the dad said, "Well, okay, we'll come." He says, "Okay, be at the game 30 minutes before the gates open." They arrive 30 minutes before the gate open. Barry takes them down to front row seats at the stadium. They load them down with merchandise. And throughout the game, players from each of the 2 teams would come up and sit with them and just talk to them and be human beings. They couldn't make it right? When you have a loved one pass away, you can't fix that. But they softened the valley. Remember peaks, valleys, beginnings and endings? They softened that valley. After the game, the dad said to Barry, he says, "We weren't going to come to the game. But I'm so glad we did because this is the last and best gift my wife ever gave our family, that we could come here and just for a minute remember her, all the great things about her in the environment of this game." Sidebar, last week they were in Tulsa, and yes, Dr. J was on the field line dancing with the players on the field. It's online, you can find it. You may have heard this story a couple years ago, right after COVID. This couple in Oklahoma City decided they're going to go to Vegas and get married. They make an appointment at a wedding chapel, they're going to fly to Vegas and get married. And if you've ever flown out of Tulsa, Oklahoma City, there are no direct flights anywhere. You have to fly to a hub, catch a connecting flight to your destination. So they get to DFW and their connecting flight is canceled. They're like, we're not going to make it to our appointment at the wedding chapel. So this guy and his wife, they're in wedding dress because they're going to go straight from the airport to the wedding chapel in Vegas. They're trying to figure out what to do. There was another traveler there with them in the same predicament, and they realized that there weren't any more flights with this airline, but Southwest Airlines had a flight leaving in 50 minutes, but not from DFW, from Love Field, which at best is a 25-minute drive. So this couple and the third guy that was in the same situation, they run out, they get an Uber, they race across the Metroplex, get to Love Field, they're literally running through the airport, her in her wedding dress, him in his suit, and this third guy trailing behind. They just make it to the plane before they close the door. Woo! Flight crew's kind of going, wow, pretty dressed up for a flight. And they're like, well, we have an appointment to get married in Vegas, but I'm not sure we're going to make it even now. Even though we made this flight, I'm not sure we're going to make it. And someone on the flight crew jokes with them, half seriously, says, you ought to just get married at 30,000 feet. Turns out the guy they shared the Uber with is an ordained minister. So somewhere between Dallas and Vegas at 30,000 feet, they got married on the plane. They took toilet paper and streamed it down the aisle for streamers. As the bride walked down the aisle, all the passengers would turn on their call lights to illuminate the aisle as she walked by. Right? Someone pulled up the wedding march on their phone and played it. They passed around a spiral for people to sign as a guest book. Somebody had a sack of powdered donuts they used for wedding cake, and they got married at 30,000 feet. That story was picked up by over 50 news outlets around the world. And so this could have been a valley. This could have been a disaster. They missed their appointment to get married in Vegas, right? But Southwest Airlines captured this low point in their life and turned that valley into a peak and magnified it. And now, not just do they have this happy story of their wedding, people all around the world have heard this story, right? They created a purple cow experience. You know, one of the things I love about ABB, and I said this earlier, is your customers decide the value of your products and services. And Zane shared with me your value formula, and man, this is incredibly insightful. I don't know if you realize how insightful this is, but it's so good. The perceived quality times the perceived service divided by the cost times the time equals the perceived value. But the customer decides what the value is. I would suggest one small edit. What if you could exponentially increase the perceived value by adding Purple Cow experiences for your customer in some way? You do something for your customers that they go, wow, did not see that coming, right? Now, you may be sitting there thinking, well, I don't know, we serve a lot of industrial customers, and some of the examples you gave were like business B2C, not necessarily B2B. You can do it in any type of environment, and you can do it for your internal customers too. You don't have to be serving an outside customer. And you can generally tell if you've achieved purple cowdom, if I may use that word, because it creates one of these four types of experiences that are described by the mnemonic epic. You elevate it in some way, right? Those two teachers in Houston elevated the graduation experience by live streaming it and having a national signing day for all the seniors. They elevated that. It creates greater levels of pride. Something you do, maybe you have a customer that's doing something kind of significant, and you magnify it in some way that you're like, you know what? What we did was pretty extraordinary. And they are even more proud because of the way you magnified it. They get some new insight into the experience that they didn't have before. Or it creates some type of deeper connection. Now, some of you are thinking, Dr. J, we tried something like that in 1980 and it didn't work. Well, you got to keep trying, right? My guess is when you first started learning to walk that you face planted a few times, right? You didn't just take off running down the hall when you were a toddler. We all face plant. Failure is a normal part of progress. In fact, if you've ever done strength training, you know you lift to the point of failure. Maybe you get 7 reps this time. Next time maybe you get 8 or 9. Failure is a normal part of progress. Some of you probably know this guy. I think probably some people in this room have an affinity for the Oklahoma City Thunder. I understand there's a couple of Fort Smith guys on that team. But SGA, most valuable player last year in the NBA, probably going to repeat this year. His first year in the league, he barely averaged double figures. He was a very average player for the Clippers. And now, he's the most valuable player. What you probably didn't know, you've heard this story about Michael Jordan, but this is the almost same story for SGA. When he was in 9th grade, he tried out for his junior varsity team and didn't make the team. But he didn't quit. He didn't give up and go, well, guess I'm not cut out to play basketball. Right? You have to keep trying. You have to keep iterating. What happens? A lot of engineers in the room probably. What happens when you heat water to 210 degrees? Not much. It gets hot, but not much. But if you increase the temperature 1% more to 212, it boils. Boils, right? Some of you are so close to having that breakthrough experience with your customers, you just need to push 1% more. You just need to try one more time. Keep iterating, right? You've seen this acronym before. The things that work, you keep doing. The things that work okay, but not as well as you'd like, you figure out a way to improve them. The things that don't work, you stop doing. And then you try new things. Here's something you probably didn't know about the Savannah Bananas. One of my former students worked for the Bananas, and so I have more insights to the behind the scenes than the average person, but they try 10 to 12 new things every game, knowing that only 2 or 3 of them will work, that most of them will not work, and they stop doing the things that didn't work, and they try 10 or 12 new things the next night. You have to keep iterating. In fact, if you hear Jesse Cole tell the story about some of the different things he tried, human resources are in here. Do you see a potential problem with them having an event called the Human Pinata? Apparently, it was a bad idea to have kids chasing someone with a bat as they tossed out candy. They toss, they do the t-shirt toss at ball games. Well, they had something like that, only when the fans would catch it and open it up, it was actually banana dulce underwear. And so, not everything works. The things that don't work, you stop doing. Keep doing the things that do work, and try some new things. Now, the skeptics in the room are saying, Dr. J, you're an academic, it's all theory to you, we live in the real world. What are you actually doing? What are you actually doing to create these type of experiences for your customers, for the people in your life, your clients? Well, I told you I teach the Capstone Business Strategy class at the University of Tulsa. Throughout the semester, we analyze the strategies of different companies. Johnson & Johnson and Heineken and lots of different companies. One of the companies we analyze are the Savannah Bananas. We look at their strategy. And we talk about the fact that something that's fairly unique about the Savannah Bananas is the employees who work there work very hard. They work really hard. They produce incredible results. When Jesse Cole and his wife Emily bought the Savannah Bananas, they were $1.8 million in debt. He was sleeping on an air mattress. They had $30 a week for groceries. They were literally living on only ramen noodles and water. The first 3 months they were in business, they sold 2 season tickets. The last estimate I saw on the valuation of their company, which is Fans First Entertainment, the last valuation I saw was over $1 billion. So we talk about the company. We talk about the fact the employees there work hard. They produce great results, but they have fun, right? They have fun. The game at Tulsa last week I was telling you about that I was line dancing at, we had a 2-hour rain today and nobody cared because the players were all up in the stands under the concourse signing autographs and hanging out and just having a great time. It was like there's no place else they'd rather be. And so then I asked my students, I said, do you think it's possible when you graduate that you can find a job where you work hard, you produce great results, but you also have fun? And they're like, well, I don't know, that seems like a long shot. So let's look at it through the lens of our class. This semester, would you say that you students have worked hard? Spoiler alert, no student ever said, no, Dr. J, I just coasted all semester. No, they all said they worked hard, and I believe they did for the most part. I said, well, I know you produced great results. I've looked at the case write-ups you've turned in. I've looked at your exam results. You have produced great results. And then I unexpectedly and suddenly, with no announcement, detonated a confetti cannon in class. And honestly, some of them download in their shorts. They're like, whoa! And I have to remind them that there was a disclaimer on the syllabus at the beginning of the semester saying that I might use pyrotechnics and different special effects. And so this is one way that I try to make my classes what I call edutainment. My students understand strategy very well when they get out, and we have a really good time. When I get the anonymous course evaluations in the semester, every semester, that's the thing that the students say. And he set off this confetti cannon in class. And by the way, if I'm lying, I'm dying. Tomorrow, At 3 o'clock, I'm going to receive the Mayo Teaching Award from the University of Tulsa for doing crazy things like this. I'm trying to create some type of purple cow experience by elevating the moment. Now, not everything I do involves a confetti cannon, but I do have a client up by Kansas City, and a while back I was driving up to see a prospective client in Leavenworth, Kansas. And on the way back through Kansas City, I stopped at my bank client there because they were celebrating their 125th anniversary of the company. Did you know less than 1% of companies make it 125 years? And so we celebrated in the lobby 125 years that they've been in business, this bank, and set off the confetti cannon. I got back to class and my students said, well, what did you do last week? I said, well, I detonated an explosive device in a bank and spent time in Leavenworth, which is a little funny if you realize there's a federal penitentiary in Leavenworth. Now, here's a personal example. A few years ago, I was reflecting on the fact that I have been remarkably blessed that I convinced my wife to marry me, and that she stuck with me for 45 years. And so I decided, you know what, we should renew our wedding vows. And so I rented a private room at this restaurant in Tulsa, hired a band, invited 100 of our friends to come and help us celebrate our wedding vow renewal, but I didn't tell my wife. I told my wife we're just going out to dinner with another couple. And so we get to the restaurant, my wife and I and this other couple, and I said to my buddy, I said, hey Rocky, have you ever seen the private room here, this restaurant? He goes, no. He goes, well, let me show it to you. So we walk back there and I open the door, and here are 100 of my wife's friends from the last 40 years. And she's having kind of what we call in my profession cognitive dissonance, right? It's like, I know all these people, but they don't go together. Here's some people I went to high school with. Here are some people I work with. Here's some people I go to church with. They don't know each other. Why are they all here? And so I had to explain to her, this was my attempt to create an epic moment that she would never forget. So we did renew our wedding vows. I don't know why we didn't go with a purple thing. We went with orange. But we renewed our wedding vows there in front of 100 of our friends from the last 40 years. And then we went on because we got married on our sophomore year of college and didn't really have a honeymoon. We went on a tour of concerts around the country. We saw Electric Light Orchestra in Chicago, saw Elton John. We saw the Eagles in Vegas, and so that was my attempt to create a purple cow experience for my wife that she would never forget. So, now just a reminder, you do not have to be in a customer-facing position to do this. You have internal customers. You don't have to be at the top of the organizational chart, right? When I first started using these best practices, I was a frontline supervisor, a middle manager. But I just started trying this, and the company I worked for started noticing our results just went through the roof. Through the roof. And the chief operating officer said, what the heck is going on? So I explained this to him. He's like, do you think you could help us write a plan? You know, we're getting ready to go public. Do you think you could write a plan for our company to help us do this? And so I did that. I helped the chief operating officer write this plan for the company. They ended up not going public because we had the 2000 .com bust. But they sold the company for $63 million, a company that the owner, single owner, started in his bedroom of his house for $63 million, so that worked okay. You know, 2,000 years ago, there was a Stoic philosopher named Epictetus that said he doesn't want to be the white thread, the common thread, the thread like everyone else. He wants to be the purple thread, the thread that stands out, right? The purple thread that's beautiful, that's distinct. And so my admonishment to you today is to stay purple. All of this is built on a basic principle I have as a manager, that every interaction we have with another human being, whether it's a coworker or a customer or just somebody we pass on the street, every interaction we have with someone, we can zap them, we can energize them in some way, or we can sap them, we can suck the life out of them. I read someplace that the words we use can heal or they can destroy. And so I try every interaction I have, whether it's with you, the people in my family, my students, my customers, is to zap them, to energize them in some way. And one way I do that is through these purple cow experiences. And here's what I know. These purple cow experiences, if you can get started doing these, they are so fun. It's the antidote for average, it's the cure for complacency, it's the medicine for mediocrity. Now, I don't know if any of you are so excited about what you've heard today that you're going to go out and get a purple cow tattooed on your arm or your chest or that type of thing. But I hope you will go out here and try something. Try to create that one purple cow experience for your customers. Now, the problem with most speakers, if you read a book, is they talk for an hour, you read 200 pages, and you get done, you're like, okay, well, all right, that's pretty good, whatever. And then you go out and do nothing. Your assignment, your mission, if you should choose to accept it, create a purple cow experience for your customers or internal stakeholders by leveraging the power of moments to create an epic event. Let me ask you a question before I wrap up here. Do you think, when you think about peaks, valleys, beginnings, and endings, do you think a birthday might qualify as that, as one of those type of events?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Do you think that it would be an epic Purple Cow experience if you had like 100 people sing happy birthday to you? Did you know that it's my wife's birthday? Serving as my videographer today, so I would like to ask you to enthusiastically in very loud voice to sing happy birthday to my wife, Colleen. Come here, Colleen. So her name is Colleen. That's the only part of happy birthday you didn't know. So if you'd help me sing happy birthday to Colleen, I'll let you go. I'll hang around if you have any questions. You can, if you're like, I want to do this, but I don't have any ideas, you can scan the QR code and I will send you like a brainstorm of ideas. All right, you ready?
Happy
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Colleen. Happy birthday to you. Stay purple.
All right, one more thing before we wrap up. If you just take a couple minutes, John and Tanner, if y'all don't mind, if we could hand those out while we're maybe doing the next thing. So we wanted to get something, we've been handing out swag all day. We want to get something to help remind us of the Purple Cow. So we've got some, these were supposed to be, we didn't look at the details. Maybe the details matter, right? So we wanted to provide these, we found these purple stress balls, right? Feel free to take more than one though, guys. So anyway, they showed up, we opened up the box, and you'll see, they're mini stress balls.
They want to get some purple cows to hand out. I was like, no, that's a little bit too much to hand out. I got the purple balls.
All right, one last thing, if you will, take a minute. We've got a survey. If you have your phone with you, you can scan the QR code. These are set up anonymously, in case you're asking. So we do want honest feedback. I mean, this is, we had the DT3 conference earlier this year. Did the same thing last year. Whatever feedback's provided, we will read every comment. We'll take it into consideration, see what we want to continue, what we want to improve, and what we want to stop. So this is for you. If you will, take a few minutes, provide the feedback, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd be glad to take questions if they have any.
Do we have any questions for Dr. Joplin while he's here? Yes, Lauren. Question.
I have a question. If ABB were to hire you to analyze our mission statement, what's one piece of advice that you would give? And as a reminder, our mission statement is to be the best system driven by our
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't get real caught up in the names, values, purpose, mission. I think it's important that you have each of those elements. And so the way I define mission is a big, hairy, audacious goal that you can accomplish in the next 5 to 10 years. And so by that definition, your mission is a little more closer to a purpose than a mission. But that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that you probably have something else that you call something else what I call a mission, right? Most companies are following a very similar process. And so you probably have something like that. One company I worked with, they were like a $40 million company in revenues a year, and so their mission was $50 million in 5 years. Well, that's pretty quantifiable, and if you either do that or you don't, right? And so my guess is ABB has something like that. They just call it something else. Good question. Is there a question back here? Change your mind?
I want to know what is your most impactful purple cow moment?
It was probably my wife's wedding vow renewal. You know, I've done some fun things with clients and customers and students, and sometimes you don't see it immediately. Sometimes you don't see it immediately. So, you know, I've been teaching for 10 years. What I didn't say was I was a CFO. And then when I was 50 years old, I decided I wanted to go back to college and impact the next generation. So I went back and got my PhD when I was 50. I've been teaching for only about 10 years. About a month ago, I had a former student who was in my very first class at Oklahoma State University travel from Mexico. He teaches in Mexico. He's from Mexico. He traveled from Mexico to Tulsa, and because he knows I'm a basketball fan, he brought me a G League, used to be D League, G League jersey of the NBA team, G League team in Mexico. He said, I just wanted to thank you for the impact you had on my life. Something else I didn't talk about, in my strategy class, this was like, I just stumbled onto this. On the first years, I thought, how can I take these strategy concepts and make them more pragmatic for my students? Because they're not going to graduate, you know, on Friday and go out and be writing strategy for their company. I thought, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have them take all these concepts we talked about, the same pyramid that I showed you. I'm going to have them take these concepts and create a strategy for their life and their career. I thought, this might be okay. And I was stunned that students come back and say, that changed my life. I had a student in one of my first classes who did this assignment. I'll call him Brian, because his name is Brian. And, if I can be honest, Brian was socially awkward, right? Look at his shoes. He had an undergrad degree in biology. He was working on his MBA because he was unemployable with an undergraduate degree in biology and no social skills. And so we went through this. I said, well, Brian, what is it that you want to do? What is it that moves you? What is your passion about? He goes, you know what? I really like to improve the quality of health care, especially for people that can't afford it. I said, well, let's work on that. So we would sit down, and he thought about what are my core values. I feel like my purpose is to improve the quality of health care, create a mission. I helped him network with some people I knew who were officers in some of the hospitals and medical care providers in Tulsa area. And so about a year later, he calls me up and says, hey, I got great news. St. Francis Hospital has hired me to be their patient quality care specialist. My job is literally to improve the quality of health care for the patients at St. Francis. I'm like, right? I was loving this, right? And so he went there, and he's doing great, and he's growing. He's getting a little more comfortable in his role. And then a couple years later, he calls me and goes, hey, can we go to lunch? And by the way, we did meet at Charleston's because that's my go-to place. We waited at lunch at the Charleston's by St. Francis Hospital in Tulsa. And he says, I'm quitting St. Francis. I said, dude, you are killing my story. You're killing me, buddy. He goes, no, he's better. I am joining a medical practice in Memphis where all of the people in Memphis that work for this healthcare provider, the doctors, the nurses, the administrators, they serve one of the poorest sections of Memphis. And not only do they serve one of the poorest sections of Memphis, all of the employees live in this neighborhood. So we're not just providing health care. These people are becoming our friends. We do life with them. And so not only was he improving the quality of health care, he was doing it for the people who could least afford it. He joined them as their chief operating officer. The guy couldn't look you in the eye when I met him. And now he's the chief operating officer of this healthcare practice in Memphis. And it's a faith-based organization, and he's a Christian, and so it was like, now the story can't even get any better. And so, I mean, I like teared up when he's telling me this. So that was impactful. But sometimes it takes years before you see it. So, yeah. Other questions? All right, well, there is a QR code in the PowerPoint, so if that's distributed in some way, you can scan the QR code. There's two QR codes. One is to get a list of like brainstorm ideas of different Purple Cow experiences for B2B customers, or if you have internal stakeholders, examples of both of those. And the other is, if you want to contact me, just ask me a question, there's a QR code that'll send you to my website. So anyway, thank you guys for sharing your time with me today. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Let's get back to the